Welcome to part 2 of Communicating Change. Before we move to the organizational level of what communicating change means, let's start with one major difference that we need to set up straight. Back in the day, when General McChrystal was the commander-in-chief of all the Allied forces in Afghanistan, he continuously told the intelligence reports to be shorter and more succinct. And they did exactly what he asked for. In one of the is the slide that awaited him. All the good intentions melted into one slide. Now, this is a common phenomenon in organizations. There is a convolution between data dumping and knowledge creation. And what we want to do in change management is, of course, the latter. I'm going to jump right in. Remember, the individual level gave you all the tools you need to communicate with your people one-on-one. But now we're trying to see it in a more generic form, as an organization rather than a host of individuals. In order to do that, I would like to share with you a real-life story of one of our clients, changed enough so you won't recognize it, but it delivers a question. Welcome to part 2 of Communicating Change. We're going to move now from the individual to the organizational level in harnessing people to support change. But first, allow me to start with one of the most common mistakes that we might make. When General McChrystal, the commander-in-chief of all the Allied forces in Afghanistan, came into one of his intelligence briefings, the people got his message. He told them repeatedly, I want it short and succinct. I want you to get to the point. And they did exactly that. From 30 slides, they boiled it down to what he asked for. This became a professional joke, but it represents something so common in so many organizations. We convolute data dumping on our people, the employees, with knowledge creation. And in change management, it's critical. Why? Because remember, the essence of communication in change management is to build trust. When you're giving me too much data that I can never possibly understand or use, that trust can actually be shattered. So let's jump in and see how we start working as a team, as a unit, as an organization to manage change rather than individual managing particular people. This is a real-life example from one of our clients. And I think that many of you would find similarities with processes you are going through. Annie, so just one of those names that we made up to disconnect the client from the story, went through a digital transformation in her country, and that meant 3 major things. First, it would require from her people double the work hours during the transformation. 2, she will have no substantial compensation to offer any of them, but to top it all up, it means that after the digital transformation works successfully and all the efficiencies would be gained, people will become redundant. Now, the big question that I would like you even to pause the webinar for a second and ask yourself, how would you address it, is how do you subscribe the team members to support such a team under such conditions? This transformation is something that we continuously go through, maybe on smaller scales with lesser ramifications. But now let's analyze this example because we'll have few takeaways that would serve us for many transformations to come. First of all, let's understand a pivotal mistake in managing projects and convoluting it with change management. project, as you can see, work according to milestones, and it's appropriate. You have KPIs, you have timelines, but it doesn't necessarily reflect our human needs, as you probably saw in the first part of this webinar. What we need to understand that much before the milestone arrives, the impact, the ramifications of the change will start dawning on the people. Emotional, logical, and actual actions would start taking place. So what we want to do is to manage communication even before that, where the actual awareness to the change starts emerging. Once you do that, you can prepare people to accept the change and understand it's a part of the organizational life and the reasoning behind it. In this particular case, it reminds me of a client of ours that made a transformation that today for many of us would seem more than offhanded or reasonable. They had big warehouses and they started introducing robots to carry packages from one place to the other. When the first robot came, the awareness point, the employees stood around, clapped their hands, took pictures, uploaded them to Instagram. But later, a few months, when 4 or 5 more robots arrived and the first 3 people lost their jobs, the top talent in this logistical department did not wait. They could see the writing on the wall and they started ditching, leaving their positions, leaving the company in crisis for a very long time. And this shows us that we need to manage these transitions. What does it mean? It means that first and foremost, we're not treating people as though they were a project in an Excel sheet and according to the milestones that we want to achieve as an organization. Let's understand, first of all, their impact, their intensity, the workload that they need to engage with. So they have low seasons, high seasons, their holidays. And then let's start adjusting those milestones when we can, the impact and awareness ahead of time and in correspondence with this reality. What we did in this project was something slightly different. We knew in advance that this transformation was going to occur. So before even the awareness started emerging, we started a small project called The Tipping Point. In it, we asked the employees to go and in teams explore big brand names and famous companies and to identify those pivotal tipping points that made them become the conglomerates that they would be in the future. What did they change? What did they do differently? How did they jump from being small to big? At the end, the employees presented their findings in front of audiences that sometimes spanned thousands of people. But the interesting thing here is that all the employees, both those that engaged actively or just listening passively, started understanding that change is paramount for organizations. It's a part of life. And they were better prepared when the impact and the news about the upcoming transformation started trickling in. Then, when the understanding came about, we did not hide the truth. We shared the ramifications. And what we did there was share the consideration and reasoning behind it. You would be surprised, but people, once engaged in eye level and honestly spoken to, might react much more responsibly than you think. They stayed engaged. But something else happened just before the beginning of the transformation actually occurred. Just before that week started, because it was very intense, a fruit basket was sent to each of the employees' homes. They weren't addressed to the employees themselves, but rather to their families. In it, there was a note describing the hard week, the commitment and challenge their family member was about to go through on behalf of a great transition, a lot of value that would be created for the entire working body. The employees were so moved and touched by that during that week, people were more committed than we could ever possibly imagine. They knew, some of them knew that they would be leaving the company after it successfully was implemented. But that was okay. After the transformation took place, we saw something remarkable. People who left the company added with pride to their CV a line, a transformation veteran, ready for the next one. And surely enough, their direct managers picked up the phone and when they went to interviews, backed them up and shared their commitment. That turned out to be a great success. And what it shows us is something very basic. Remember that grief cycle that we've seen in the previous webinar? Well, here let's see it in an organizational level and what does it actually mean? There will be a dip. There will be a slump in productivity when major transformations occur. And it's fine, it's natural. People are preoccupied, things distract them, and it's okay. But when you're managing the change, when you're communicating all the time, you would see that instead of being in the bottom, you gain all the green area and you're staying on top. Meaning that it takes less time to go back to the same place of productivity you once were in, and the productivity itself doesn't slump so low. What it shows us is that it doesn't only relate to a single transformation. This is an accumulative effect that will gain you more value as time passes by. Each transformation, whether it's bad or even the need management, need communication. And eventually, if we communicate well, we aggregate all this additional value you see in the green spots into a very big whole. Sometimes it can spell out hundreds of millions of dollars, depending how big the organization or transformation is. And that leads us to understanding the impact of change management on the organization itself. If you would notice here, when we don't have change management, you would find that the milestones occurring at the end have huge disruptions to the BAU, the business as usual. We see deeper and more aggressive effects on the productivity, about the concentration and focus of the workforce. And when you add the change management layer, you would see that the ramification and disturbances become much, much slower when the milestones occurs. It will exist, and it's normal, it's natural, but it's manageable. So when we're setting the KPIs, we shouldn't only set KPIs reflecting the objectives of the project, but also management, such as retention, talent. Just imagine what it means when your top talent leaves you because too much uncertainty accumulates and create a cognitive engagement, or the engagement is high and the organization can go through a transition much easier, as well as the people themselves. But this is the aspect of the organization. Some of us are not senior enough to influence the entire organization, and maybe we can only impact a unit, a division, a team. But what I want to show you is that we can do something even more as a member of an organization and take it to the next level. Taking it to the next level means something slightly more demanding, probably the most effective in both webinars, based on Harvard Business School research that found very interesting insights concerning to how do we acquire new behaviors and actually retain them. How much knowledge, how many TED Talks have you listened to so far? And how much of that knowledge did you actually implement? If you want to find a cool technique that can help you in multiple ways, to do is very simple. First of all, create a personal plan. In our case, create communication plan. So you would know exactly what you need to do and when. Do it frequently and will not get lost in translation. 2, don't keep it to yourself. Make it visible and public. Declare before your team and your people that you are going to commit to communicating every week or every 2 weeks. You're going to allocate this amount of time because it's that important. And remember, by merely listening, sharing, reflecting, you will gain a lot of engagement. A leader or a manager, you would see that merely by doing these 2 steps, building a plan and socially committing to it, you will increase the chances of actually following up on it and doing it to 29%, which is amazing. And new behavior, such a commitment with all the pressure, that is a great step forward. But it doesn't end there. If you want to push the mantlet, add a partner to be accountable to. Pick a peer, another manager, a friend, preferably from the organization where you can share freely the information with. But you need to be accountable to them. Why? Because once you need to give some sort of an update, it puts you and pushes you to the wall to actually perform. I did or performed this team meeting, we shared information, it was great. And that is something that I can start measuring. But even more, if you committed to communicating every week or 2 weeks, I can check you up, not according to your gut feeling, but actual results. But last but not least, it is make it costly. If you're committing to changing your behavior, and here it's a life tip from their research, you need to put consequences on the table. If you succeed, grant yourself something amazing and positive that you really appreciate or want, because having a gain or a prize at the end motivates you. On the other hand, if you fail to do and follow up on your commitment, the new behavior, you need a negative sanction, something very costly and painful, something that would hurt you doing. Because once you have these 2 elements, you would see that the probability of adopting a new behavior and incorporating it into your routine rockets to 80%. It's phenomenal. Try these 4 steps and you would see that the new behaviors you set for yourself actually work. Now let's take a look at how should your personal change management communication plan should look like. And you can extrapolate it to many other venues in how you communicate and how you take behavior and make it into a new self. First of all, timeline. It has to be prioritized over other things. We're all busy. There are all kinds of miscellaneous and urgent things that would come up. If you don't prioritize it, it shows. Remember our chapter 1, lead by example. If it's not so important and you can give it up when urgent matters come in, it reflects the meaning to the rest of the employee force. So it needs to be regular and frequent. 2, stay ahead of the rumor mills. Don't wait until the information that you could have shared already came and passed. Remember, it's not only about results, it could be all sorts of things that you can give me, such as consideration, needs, thoughts, lines, and other comparisons. Manage the impact and awareness. Remember, it's not a milestone. People don't react like that in reality. They need to know from you when the awareness starts emerging and when the impact starts setting in. 2, own the process. This is a hotbed for excuses. Sometimes we would say, I don't know, so what could I communicate? Go ahead and ask the key stakeholders for the information if you need it. Share only what you know and allowed to say. Remember what we mentioned in the previous segment. We are here to create cohesion as a group, as an organization. We're not here to contradict other people or to share information ahead of time. 3, announce your communication plan. Once you commit to it, once you make it public, you would see that you would adhere to it and you would stand by it. 3, we need logic. We need to explain not only what is about to change, but also the reasons behind it, the big why, the values, the ramifications, and so forth. If you communicate the considerations and not only the end results, you would see that people get aware and can buy into the process and the rationale behind it much more easily. Identify and address the different type of resistance. Remember, different people are effective in different ways. There are different types of resistance, and we usually attribute it to knowledge. So many managers tell me, but I told them. It doesn't matter. They can't always hear you in the same way. And 2, the fact that you said something doesn't mean that it's sunk in. Next, credibility. Remember, change management is a conduit to trust or the breaking of. So be honest. Remember that you are your most valuable brand. Don't tarnish it by saying things which are not true or you wouldn't want to be associated with you. And remember, sometimes you can't share information and it's fine. It's your obligation. But on the other hand, don't try to take shortcuts by mitigating an immediate small conflict by saying something that is not true. Usually, it will backfire in the future. So pay attention to it. Stay consistent with a vision and mission. Remember, you're not standing on your own. If we want to give a larger purpose, a reason for people to commit to change or stay connected and engaged with the organization, we need a higher purpose. Hopefully it's represented in your vision and your mission, values. If not, we'll have a different webinar of how to obtain it. Let's assume just for a second that you don't believe that the current vision or mission of the organization is fine-tuned enough. Try and find your own truth that you can connect to, that would motivate you, and communicate that. Adapt and connect to the audience's needs. This is going to lead to a lot of empathy. People will trust you more because once you acknowledge those needs, you will see that your communication and messages adapt accordingly. Emotions. Humans are not machines. Encourage dialogue and emotional expression. Allow them to vent out. Encourage it. Reflect the feelings that you heard with your own words. You can't imagine, even in other parts of life, even with your family members, when somebody has a very big, strong emotional reaction to some sort of situation, and you will take the time to reflect it in your own words, repeating it, you will make sure that they feel that they have been understood. If I've missed something, they will correct me, which is great. And I can repeat it again with that amendment. And at that point, you will actually see a physical reaction of stress leaving the body because, first of all, they got me. They understood me. I don't know if they agree with me, but at least they understood me. And that is invaluable. Next, show me you truly here for me. It means that I'm engaging with you, I'm present, I care about your needs. You show it and demonstrate it by the attention, your undevoted attention to me at this point, and by your understanding of those needs and catering to them. You would see that the trust catapults forward. And eventually, evaluate yourself. It's very easy to live in a bubble and conduct arguments in our own heads. But eventually, do your people actually support that change? Are your people engaged and committed? Did their performance improve or lessen? Give yourself some measurable KPIs that don't just rely on your gut feelings, because both you and that plan partner that I've mentioned before would be able to gauge and to assess you moving forward. Now, this is not just theory. This is not just something nice to know or nod your head in agreement. This is actionable items. I would encourage you to stop the webinar, take your time, and start crafting your own communication plan. This is something that is required from you as being both a manager and a leader. By the way, they're not the same, but we'll discuss it in a different episode. Make sure you build it, commit to it, make it public, put some rewards or sanctions at the end, and you would see that your team would love you for it. You will feel better with yourself because trust, engagement, the flow of information, and even tension would be improved. Now, we want to move people into embracing and engaging some big change. But in order to do so, one of the best shortcuts that you can provide is bringing up and creating a compelling change story, something that people can latch into. Telling stories is probably the main source of data retention and data transmission throughout the history of humanity, some might say since the linguistical revolution. Use it to your needs. What it means is very simple, that if you create a good enough story, and remember, not perfect, we'll give you a different session about how to build stories, incorporate stories, and give you shortcuts to deliver them quickly and easily. But just remember this, that if you deliver the message with a good enough story, it creates a dopamine spot in your brain, making it far more memorable. You have memories that can last and span decades, and you can remember them vividly. And usually it's connected to some sort of story. How much of the information you learned in your 10th, 11th, or 12th grade do you remember now? What do you remember sometimes from last month? This is a great way of embedding it in your long-term memories. Now, this is what it means when we're talking about the effect on our brains leveraging stories. When I'm giving you only data, you would see that only 2 parts of the brain are stimulated. But when you deliver the same data in the form of a story, voila, 7 different parts flare at the same time in our brains, giving us 3.5 times more chances of remembering the same piece of information. And people would appreciate you for it because it allows them to better understand and engage. Remember, when people are stressed, our listening capacity plummets. When we're using stories, we're increasing the receptors that can incorporate the information, retain, and engage with it. And it's amazing. Now let me show you, before we'll go to the different sessions of how to build stories and what's so unique about them, a smaller shortcut that would allow you to start doing it right here, right now, without learning new tools. And that is the following. In a story, and when you're communicating information inside a corporation or organization, you have a core. You have a story, vision, values that are the raison d'etre of the organization itself. Surrounding that core, that if you would connect to and leverage, it will create consistency because it's not falling out of the blue, even if it's with a phrase or a few notes about it, but connected it to the higher, long, ongoing purposes of the organization. Then you surround it with the information that you want to specifically share. It doesn't matter if it's an announcement in IT or it's a new way of submitting receipts to accounting. This specific information is the data that you're transmitting. And now comes the magic. Now let's wrap it with a shortcut of a story. And it starts by doing the following thing. Add something personal to what you're saying. Now, it doesn't need to be all of these things. These are just examples. It could be genuine. It could be adapted to some sort of situation or to yourself. You can show vulnerability, which is a great shortcut as we've seen before. But by giving a personal touch, you make it unique. Then add an emotional attribute. Remember, people are far more emotional than logical, far more than you think. And By giving some emotional attributes, you can create more commitment, you can give some energetic form, you can be excited, and all of these things will carry through. Then, choose your style. You can be clear, simple, short, which I would recommend usually, which is very effective. By and large, it would help you solve most of your data information transference to other people. But again, even if you take just one element of each of these four, you would see that people will find it much more compelling and interesting. And at the end, of course, we want to incorporate logic. What is the value, the ramification, expectations, whatever that would give me that big, all-encompassing why that we need to know in regards to the change, because we need to believe that it's necessary and it has benefits, especially for us, not only for the organization. But the magic of this structure is that it is so easy to implement, and the effect is the following. If we did that, even if you and I are the same level managers in the same organization, leveraging the same story, vision, and values, but you come from IT and I come from finance, you would see that your story, once you incorporate those four elements, will look starkly different than mine, and for the better, because it brings in both consistency, the core, and diversity, the form. And people will have the benefit of both. So let's sum it up. Let's say you don't have enough time, you're overworked, and you just need the bottom line of what you need to do and perform to manage change rather than change managing you. Let's start with the why. It is the most cost-effective way to commit people to change. Communicate with them. Don't shower them or lavish them with valuables or money or other things. This is what they need more than all. And two, it's your obligation as a leader, communicating, sharing the information and the reasoning, and there is always something to communicate. Don't fall into the trap of waiting until final resolutions would emerge, because they will probably be too little, too late in concerning your people. Two, the what. Engage ongoing, honest dialogue with your people. It builds the trust. Once I can communicate and feel free in communicating with you, sharing with my emotions, I trust you and I know that you're there for me. Do it in a regular and frequent manner. I would encourage you, build and commit to your communication plan. It would boost the chances that you would actually perform it, and you can assume that your people don't know as much as you do. From our first seminar, you remember the disparity between C-level managers, senior managers, and employees is unbelievable. 70% and more of the information gets lost between these hierarchies. So the more you communicate, the better chances your people will understand it and engage with it. And how? Reflect real empathy. You need to be there for them. This empathy would be distributed and personified by you adapting, for instance, your message to different groups. Once I see that you're doing it, I would appreciate, and people will recognize it immediately. But don't trust your gut feelings alone. Ask for feedback, monitor, and evaluate your progress. Sometimes you'll do brilliantly, and sometimes you'll need to adapt. But by merely remembering these four stages, by adhering to the best of your ability, even without remembering all the tools, you will already take a giant step forward. Because remember, what we want to do is to make an actual change. I would encourage you, think, even stop now again the webinar, and ask what are the key takeaways you took from this segment. It doesn't mean that everything that was shared is relevant to you. But what it actually needs to do is for you to identify what feels right for you, makes sense, and that you would actually act upon. If it would remain as theory, we've done nothing. And remember, it's not about you, it's about your employees. So at the end, if you start communicating regularly, you will see that you are actually watering and showering with blessings the fertile soil of your organization. You would start creating a far better and superior employee experience journey just by communicating change in a clever, smart, frequent way. So remember, don't wait, initiate. To be continued.